All right, we're back with App Stories. We've got a great show for you today, and it's brought to you by Revenue Cat and Instabug. Federico Viticci is with me, and I'm John Voorhees. How are you doing today, Federico?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, John?
Very well, thanks. I'm having a good day. I've been thinking about all the hardware that is coming down the line, hopefully later this year from Apple, because, we're in this weird spot in the early part of the year where, boy, there's not a whole lot of tech news going on. It's not even just Apple. I mean, it's like there's virtually nothing. I mean, I open up my RSS reader and there's never any news in there anymore. It feels like
nothing is going on.
It's totally
there's
quiet.
a real drought of really anything right now, and even iOS 15.4, which is currently in beta. I mean, besides universal control, which is not exactly a new feature because we knew about it last year. It was delayed a bunch of times. 15.4 is not really that exciting. I mean, go back to 2 years ago, and by this time, at this time of the year, we were talking about the native pointer in iPadOS, right? And the Magic Keyboard. Like the spring was usually a more exciting time. Like a 0.4 update was usually a more exciting time. But hey, maybe we're gonna get 15.5 and it's gonna be the exciting spring update. I honestly don't know. Maybe not. We're living in weird and strange times in terms of Apple news and software releases. I don't know what to think anymore. But in that spirit, if the news ain't happening, we're gonna make up the news.
We're going to. We're gonna tell you what we think the news will be in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, so we want to talk today about all of the Apple hardware rumors that are out there. There have been a lot of rumors, and nothing's happened yet. But if you believe the rumors, we should have an event relatively soon in March. So I just want to go through how you think this entire year is going to play out, because to me, what's really interesting is the rumors seem to be all over the place, and I think that makes it more fun to talk about because I don't feel like everything is set in stone, even in terms of the rumors. So why don't we start off with March? Because traditionally Apple has had a March event, and it oftentimes includes the iPad. If you go back all the way to like the event in Chicago that was held at a local high school in the Chicago area, when they unveiled the base model iPad update, I think it was that year, that's been something that's been generally refreshed in the spring, the iPad. And there are other things, rumored that I think might work together to make a pretty good event in March. What do you think?
Remember when the March event was the services event? Was that last year or 2 years ago? When was it? Was it last year? I think it was last year, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think we could see services this year, Federico. I think this Apple Music classical service, I think the time is now for that to come out, and that would be part of an event.
Interesting. Okay.
I think it would be a small part of an event, potentially, unless there was some sort of, if it's going to be a standalone app, and I tend to think it probably will be its own app just because classical music is so different from the rest of the music industry. If it's only a classical music app, I don't see it being one of the tentpole features for an event, but it's the kind of thing that I could see Apple talking about right up top, like the last event or whenever it was that they did the HomePod Mini, and then all of a sudden the Siri voice plan was announced, which was a really strange moment. But it's that kind of moment in an event that I expect for something like Apple Music Classical, probably.
Yeah. So you're referring to the fact that Apple said, following the acquisition of the classical music service PrimePhonic last year, they said they were going to do a separate service for classical music listeners and Apple Music subscribers. And recently, I believe 9to5 Google spotted references to Apple Classical in the music app for Android, or in the Android widget for Apple Music. They found this reference to the name Apple Classical. So I believe that's what the separate app is going to be called. And I think it would be interesting to have a service tie-in for this March event.
Right.
Obviously, the rumors are also pointing to if we are reading the tea leaves, so to speak, there's another idea that I wanna bring up here. So there's rumors of a new iPad Air, an iPad Air refresh.
Hmm.
That's gonna be a new version of the iPad Air that we got last year. Well, when was
No, I
it?
think it was 2 years ago
It
in the
was 2020. It was September
yeah, it was in the
2020,
fall.
right? And that has gone without an update for the entirety of 2021. So there's rumors of this new version of the iPad Air. Now, you know how in iOS 15.4, we covered this on Mac Stories. We haven't talked about it on App Stories, I think. There's the new contactless payment feature coming to iPhone users, right?
Right, right.
What's it gonna be? What's it gonna be called? Tap to pay.
Yes.
Tap to pay is coming to iPhone now. Isn't it strange that Apple said this is only coming to iPhones because only iPhones have an NFC chip inside, I suppose. But if the proposition of that feature is that any kind of merchant, any kind of small business is going to be able to turn an iPhone into a payment terminal. Now, isn't it strange that that's iPhone only? Because how many times have you seen those iPads being used as cash registers or as
Right.
payment terminals, right? It's a lot more common to see an iPad in one of those like stands, connected to a Square reader, perhaps. Like
Sure, sure.
I've seen iPads used as points of sale systems a lot. Now, wouldn't surprise me if this new iPad Air also has NFC and is compatible with, if in addition to tap to pay on iPhone in 15.4, there's also tap to pay on iPad in iPad
Yeah,
OS 15.4.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that an Air really fits that role particularly well because
Mm-hmm.
I think the iPad Pro is a little too
I
much.
mean, you wouldn't want to buy an iPad Pro for your local business just to accept payments.
Right, exactly, because you're just using the NFC and you don't necessarily need that horsepower, but you do need a connection to the internet of some kind or cellular, and that size screen would be good for it too. And maybe the base model is just a little too underpowered. So yeah, I think it would work perfectly
Yeah.
well for that. I think that that's a really good call. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the base model get an update in March too. I mean, though, they don't; those tend to
Could
be
be.
fairly
Yeah.
unexciting updates, but it might get a chip boost or so. I mean, I don't expect there to be major changes made to that one, but who knows?
Base model still has the home button, right?
I
With
know it
Touch
does.
ID.
It could
Hmm.
get the button, the Touch ID on the power button, just like the iPad Air got in the fall of
But then
2020.
what's the difference between base model and iPad Air if both have the same design?
Yeah, speed and screen size and options for
Yeah, okay.
storage, I suppose. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. I think the base model is always going to be the one where you don't have a lot of choices. It's the off the shelf model that's not super customizable, and then the Air is a lot closer to an iPad Pro. At least it was as of fall 2020.
Yeah, I could see that happen, but I think it definitely would make sense for Apple to extend this payment API that third-party companies will be able to use. By the way, it's not an Apple only thing. Apple is working with Stripe, and I
Right.
believe they're gonna announce, I'm sure, other partners if they talk about this service at the event, and I believe they will because the timing on these things is usually perfect, right?
Yes, and that would round out the service message for the event too. If you add that with classical, it's usually not
Exactly.
right. It's not limited to one service. Usually in an event these days, you get at least two, maybe three services, even if they're smaller updates. Apple likes to remind people that those services are there and that they continue to evolve.
Right. So, in terms, I think we're definitely going to see a recap of everything that's coming in 15.4.
Yep.
Apple Classical as a spin off on Apple Music. I'm sure we will see a mention of Tap to Pay on iPhone. And if they are announcing new iPads, so a base model iPad seems likely, a new iPad Air seems likely. The iPad Mini, I don't see happen because it just came
No.
out in September. So it's no time for an iPad Mini update right now. But if they are going to talk about these iPads and if they are going to recap 15.4, it makes sense to also demo the other big feature in 15.4, which is universal control. Now, what better way to demo
True.
universal control than the new iPads and maybe some new Macs, right?
Definitely. I tend to think that we're not going to see the iPad Pro until the fall. I think all the Pro hardware is coming, for the most part, is coming in the fall. But I do think we're due for some new, Apple Silicon Macs. And I think the one that we're most likely to see is the Mac Mini more than anything else. Because right now we've got an M1 Mac Mini, which is a very basic model that has basically the same configuration and and a lot of port limitations. But I do feel like we're going to get the pro end of that spectrum filled out with Apple Silicon, because those are still Intel Macs right now. And I expect we'll see two. I don't think these are going to be M2s, which I know some people have suggested. I think they'll be probably M1 Pro and M1 Max would be my guess. Similar to what we have in the MacBook Pros, the 14 and 16-inch ones, but coming to the Mac Mini with more ports, because I think the one reason I don't have an Apple Silicon Mac Mini is that it's too limited in terms of ports. So I'm really hoping we see like at least 3, hopefully 4 Thunderbolt ports on that thing, and configurations that allow you to increase the RAM up to something more substantial like 32 gigabytes, as well as more storage, maybe up to a 2 terabyte option.
Let me ask you this. Is it time for a proper consumer-friendly Apple display?
Oh, it absolutely is. This is, what? And here's the thing, Federico. If you've got iPads, this is the time.
I see where you're going. Okay.
This is the time where maybe they don't bring it out on stage that we're going to have the ability to run an iPad on this new display. But you bring this display out and you say, oh, this is great for the Mac Mini, and it also works with the iPad. Just kind of setting the stage for later in the year when we get to WWDC. And at WWDC, we'll be told with the update to iPad OS, we're going to get kind of real, true external display support for the iPad. I think that the time is the spring to start setting the stage for all of that, but that we won't actually get the software that drives that display from an iPad until later in the year. What do you think?
Yes. Although we did get, so we just mentioned a few minutes ago, like how the spring release of iPad OS used to be more exciting.
True.
I could see a repeat of what we got with the pointer in 13.4.
Where it just showed up.
It just showed up in 15.5 or something. Where like Apple is like, hey, we're adding real external display integration. But, see, that to me still feels like a WWDC thing, though. Like
it does.
It involves a ton of changes, I bet, from a window management standpoint.
Yes, and it also feels like a feature that, although I expect will work with something like the iPad Air, that it's more geared to the people who use the iPad Pro. And that's why I think a lot of this stuff all comes together in the fall, which is when I expect the more Pro Max to be released alongside an iPad Pro. But I think the stage could be set pretty early on with a spring event. And I really want that display. I mean, it makes sense to have a display come out at the same time as a Mac Mini, because the Mac Mini needs a display. And so it's very easy to sell as we have the display now that works with the Mac Mini, and it's not going to cost you $5,000 to buy.
All right. So as a recap, in March, so ideally in March, in a couple of weeks, we're going to get iPad Air, base model iPad, maybe a new base model MacBook Pro that is not as fancy as the 14-inch and the 16-inch version.
Right.
Some new Mac Minis. Which chips do you think, John? M1 Pro, M1 Max?
I think both. I think there'll be 2 models. One's going to be the Pro, one's going to be the Max. And I think the rumors have pointed towards 3 computers in the spring. And I think that's kind of where I see it shaking out, where one is the Pro, one is the Max, and the third one is the 13-inch MacBook Pro.
Okay. And then, of course, a recap of 15.4, Apple Classical, Tap to Pay on iPhone, maybe on iPad as well.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Revenue Cat. If you're a developer, your time should be spent focused on what makes your app special, not hassling with StoreKit. In-app subscriptions are critical to a lot of app success, but getting the infrastructure right is tough. That is, of course, unless you're using Revenue Cat. Revenue Cat is payments infrastructure simplified. You don't have to worry about managing servers or writing complex back-end code. They take care of all of that for you. What's more, Revenue Cat is cross-platform, so you can decide to expand beyond iOS to Android and the web, and you still can use Revenue Cat. Revenue Cat lets you sync status across all of your customers' devices, and it has terrific out-of-the-box analytics to track your revenue, customer retention, and churn, so you're always on top of how your business is performing. Revenue Cat integrates in-app purchase data with best-in-class tools, too, and it's trusted by over 9,000 apps, including ones like Notion, StockTwits, and photography app VSCO. Set up Revenue Cat today. Integrating it with your app will take just hours, not days. So what are you waiting for? Visit RevenueCat.com today to learn more. There's a link in the show notes, too, which will let them know you came from App Stories. Again, that URL is RevenueCat.com. Subscription management built for mobile apps. Our thanks to Revenue Cat for their support of the show.
Now, let's stay on hardware because we are going to, we're going to be talking about the software and WWDC and the things we want to see later in the year. There's a time for that, and it's not right now. WWDC. So we are assuming that between March and June, we're not going to get any new hardware. So we're going to get new hardware at the March event. Then April, May, no hardware. Maybe some watch bands. Like I could see some watch bands, like a spring collection.
That's possible.
Spring collection, they usually, maybe new cases for the iPhone.
Sometimes the product red stuff tends to come out in that time frame, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So new accessory colors, maybe. I don't think it's time for AirPods Pro. I think they're going to do those in the fall. So let's mention those later. WWDC. Now, usually WWDC is all about the software, all about the new OSs that are coming out. However, there are some big, there's two other machines for pro users that still need to make the Apple Silicon transition, right? It's the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro. Now, we know from speculation from Mark Gurman that the Mac Pro is going to be based on a quad core, it's going to be like 4 M1 Max chips stacked together in this wildly powerful configuration. So it's like a quad M1 Max type of setup going on, which sounds incredible. And despite that, it's going to be half the size of the current tower. Any thoughts on this, John?
Well, I think that I believe that rumor personally. I think that that's likely to be what we get. I don't think we're going to get it at WWDC, but I think we'll see it at WWDC.
You think we're going to see it?
I think we'll see it. That's been something that Apple has done in the past, even going back as far as, was it 2013 or 2014 when the trash can Mac Pro came out, and that was my first WWDC, and I was in the Moscone Center, and they had it just like they did the original iPhone behind a glass tube. Basically, you could walk up to it and stare at the black trash can from the outside. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that on stage, and maybe even the iMac Pro would see on stage. But it's just not usually a hardware event. The Pro Display XDR was announced at WWDC too, and those were available hands-on after that. Was that 2019 maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
That was available for people to check out at the convention center afterwards, but it didn't ship right away. So I do feel like it's the right audience and time to talk about the Mac Pro especially, but even the iMac Pro, if Apple really puts in some beefy chips into that thing, it's going to be a great developer tool as well. I mean, not every developer needs a Mac Pro. I mean, you can do a lot with the existing M1 Macs, if you're a developer. And an iMac Pro, I think, will be better yet.
Hmm. Beefy chips sounds delicious.
Beefy
by the way.
chips.
Beefy chips. I
Yes.
love some beefy chips right now. So, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Where does a bigger base, like a bigger regular iMac, fit into this? Because one of the missing features, if you will, from last year, from the new iMac, was a bigger version of it, right? Where's the bigger iMac for non-pro users? Or do you think they're going to do a bigger iMac, but that's going to be for pro users only?
I think that they will do a bigger iMac, and they might I think they're going to do a couple of different models of it. One that's very high end and one that's kind of sits in between the existing 24-inch iMac and the high end one. And that in between one will probably, I think they'll still call it a Pro, even if it maybe doesn't quite match the definition of Pro if you were thinking of it in terms of what pros do. But the way Apple tends to use the term Pro, I think it'll fit perfectly well. I think the advantages of an iMac Pro are going to be things like a bigger screen, 27 inches, I suspect, a lot more I/O, faster processors, and more RAM. Because I used the 24-inch model for a long time that I reviewed, and it's just the RAM, the memory in that thing is just a little bit too little for certain tasks like video work and compiling software. So something higher than 16, 32, 64, something like that. I think that option needs to be there. Even the 24-inch, you can get a pretty good amount of storage on it. But I think the real story will be the size of the screen, the RAM, and then just some faster chip. I suspect an M2 probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see. I think we're actually gonna see the M2 in a bunch of products. The thing is, I believe we're gonna see the M2 in the Mac Mini. So I think there's gonna be a base model Mac Mini with an M2. Okay. I think there's gonna be a refresh of the iMac with the M2. But there's also the rumor of the redesigned MacBook Air with the M2, with the colorful versions of the MacBook Air, that I honestly don't know where to fit in this timeline, because Apple has been filing, entries in those regulatory databases, like in the Eurasian database, for example, for a bunch of Macs lately. But it seems unlikely that they're gonna unleash them all at the March event. And like you mentioned, WWDC is usually a software event. Now, is it possible that Apple will just push out some of these computers as press releases without having to build an entire event around those announcements? Maybe, but if you have a big redesign for the MacBook Air, you probably want to show that off.
I think so. I think that the MacBook Air, to me, is the hardest one to place, because the M1 MacBook Air came out in the fall. It really hasn't been that long since that computer was unveiled. So March does seem a little bit early. June seems unlikely because it's a software event. So maybe we do just get a long list of Macs at one or two events in the fall.
So you don't think WWDC, which brings us to September, right?
Yep.
But September is usually iPhone, Apple, and Apple Watch. Now, there's a big question mark here, which is what's going to happen with the headset? So one of the rumors that, seems to be pretty confirmed at this point is that Apple is going to unveil their first take on this AR, VR sort of mixed reality headset, and that it's going to be a pricey one running Apple Silicon with power comparable to a MacBook Pro even, and that it's going to be first developer oriented. So my theory here is that this is going to be one of the big announcements of WWDC. They are going to show off the headset at WWDC. It's not coming out in the summer, but they're going to unveil the whole platform for it. I think WWDC this year is going to be all about what you can build for this new platform that Apple is going to call, I don't know, Reality OS seems to be the code name, but it's also a horrible name to say, like Reality OS. I don't really like the sound of it. Now, I think developers will be able to request developer units. I don't think it will be for sale to the general public in the summer. I do feel like, though, this could be one of the products that launches in the September, October timeframe. And I
Yep.
feel like they're going to do they're going to do what they did with the Apple Watch. Like they do a first big announcement at WWDC and they show it off, but there's going to be more focus on the software aspect of it and the platform building aspect of it. But then they're gonna redo a proper introduction for the general public at a September event, and they could justify the high price tag, right? Because there's rumors that put this product in the ballpark of like $1,500 or $2,000 even,
Right.
but they can pitch it as the most advanced and the most powerful headset for AR, VR, or mixed reality that has a strong app ecosystem and that has the graphics of a MacBook Pro if it runs on a version of the M1 Pro or the M1 Max even, and they're gonna sell this as a power user product basically. But I could see that sort of double introduction, if you will, one for developers, one for the people. Now we know the regular folks also watch WWDC, right? Because it's an Apple event, but it's the presenting it to two different audiences, if you will, that I think could be something that we see from Apple in 2022.
Yeah, I think that that's a good theory. It's really hard to wrap my head around the AR VR headset. I kind of feel like I did before we got the iPhone, and there were lots of rumors that Apple was doing an iPhone, and everybody thought it was going to look like a big iPod, or maybe it would look, or it would have a keyboard or whatever it would be. And no one really imagined that it was just going to be a slab of glass and nothing else. And I kind of feel the same way about a headset where I feel like there's a lack of imagination about what they're actually going to do. I mean, I suppose to a degree, it's like, and this was true of the iPhone too, it's still, an iPhone had to be something you could hold in your hand, and a headset has to be something you can put over your eyes. But I feel as though the details and contours of it are just maybe beyond everyone's imagination at this time. And that's why having an event in June really makes a lot of sense, because it gives developers something concrete that they can shoot for and start thinking about apps that would work with it. And then it gets people in the more general audience used to the idea and what it might be capable of, so that when it finally gets released later down the line, people are kind of more ready for it than they are today. And so I think that's why I think that's a good theory, Federico.
Yeah. So for context, just to recap on this product, we are expecting this headset that's going to have two 4K micro OLED displays, two main processors, Wi-Fi 6, eye tracking, of course, and this one is interesting, a see-through mode for AR, so that you could use it in theory both for VR, but with the see-through mode, it could also be used for AR. And of course, it's going to have, object tracking, hand gesture recognition, all of the features that we've seen Apple build and improve in ARKit over the years. You have to assume they're going to be enabled by default and supported by default on this new headset. And it's going to be one powerful unit, it seems, and also quite expensive. I am really curious to see what the angle is here. Like, how
do you sell this to people?
How do you sell this to people? Like, are there pro AR users? Like, yeah, but it seems like a very small audience. Now, I'm intrigued by the product, but I'm also intrigued by the pitch for the product.
Yeah, I think that the pitch is very interesting, because historically, so far, a lot of these types of devices have been pitched as game machines. And I just don't know that Apple's is going to be geared towards that. I mean, they may try that, but I don't think the kind of games that Apple does really lend themselves to that. Maybe that's what the WWDC pitch will be all about. I don't know, but we'll have to see. I think it's going to be interesting. I also, kind of as an aside, think this is really the year where Wi-Fi 6 is going to take off and become something that people really want to have, because of things like this, because of AR headsets, because of portable gaming devices, things that use a lot of bandwidth and need to have a really good, strong, fast connection to the internet all the time. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Instabug. Building mobile apps presents some challenges, and bugs, crashes, and performance issues can be a nightmare for developers. But what if I told you that you could not only detect those issues, but also get a holistic understanding of the quality of your app from your user's point of view? Instabug's lightweight SDK grabs all of the insights you need to build top quality apps through comprehensive bug and crash reports, performance monitoring, and real-time user feedback, all in one SDK. With Instabug, you can continuously monitor and measure the performance of your app as perceived by your users, empower those users to report issues and ask questions seamlessly from right inside your app, get all of the information you need about bugs, crashes, and other issues, and get them fixed in record time, all with a focus on privacy and security. And you don't need to worry about the hassle of switching to a new tool. It only takes minutes to integrate Instabug into your app, and it fits right within your own workflow, with support for apps like Jira, Slack, Trello, GitHub, Zendesk, and over 10 other popular tools. Join over 25,000 top mobile developers around the world who use Instabug to ship high-quality apps. Go to try.instabug.com/appstories so they know you came from the show. Again, that URL is try.instabug.com/appstories. Our thanks to Instabug for the support of the show.
What else are we expecting in the fall beyond, a new iPhone, a new Apple Watch? I want to say AirPods. I think AirPods Pro too.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we're going to see a fall that's a lot like we saw a couple of years ago, where we get a lot of things, and some of it might come out as press releases, because we have the traditional things like the phone and the Apple Watch, but the AirPods Pro are going to be due by the fall. It's possible you could see the AirPods Max this fall. I kind of tend to think not. I think that those are coming, but they'll either be very late fall this year or maybe something that comes out in early 2023. But then you've also got the headset, and we've got the Pro Max still too. We're not entirely sure when the MacBook Airs fall into this whole schedule too. So we could have a very, very busy fall, I think, Federico.
Yeah, well, Gurman said Apple is preparing for the busiest year they've had in a while. All these new Macs they want to update, a brand new device to introduce, and updates to nearly everything on the existing lineup. I think, honestly, the only thing that will not get an update this year is the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. Because
the AirTags. I don't think the AirTags.
Right, and the AirTags. And maybe we're not going to get AirPods 4 because we got the AirPods 3 a few months ago. But everything else is up for grabs, I think. I mean, even AirPods Max, I think it's been a couple of years. It will be a couple of years in the fall.
In the fall it will be, because they were very late in 2020. I think they shipped right like November, I want to say, right before the holidays.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be one expensive year if you're an Apple fan, and I think it's going to be
start saving,
especially I am super intrigued by this headset.
Me too.
Really not just from a gaming perspective, because there's also PSVR version 2 coming out in the fall for PlayStation 5, and that has me super excited because it's going to be a single cable headset for advanced VR on PS5 with brand new controllers without a camera. So it's got inside out tracking without having a standalone camera, as it was the case before on PS4. So realistically, we could see Apple headset and PSVR 2 in the same season this year.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how those two things are received by consumers. I like the look of Sony's headset. I think that what they've come up with looks really good. The first version was a little bit cobbled together with the light wands and things from the previous generation console. This one is a lot more ergonomic and streamlined looking, and and it has some really neat specs.
Yeah. We're gonna go buy one. You know those fake wooden heads that people use as displays for headphones on their
Yeah.
shelves? Like we gotta buy those, but for headsets to store all the headsets.
Oh, so
It's
you're gonna
not
have
creepy.
those.
Look, it's not creepy, right?
No. You're gonna have a bunch of heads lined up on your bookshelf in your bedroom with different gear on them. Okay, all right, Federico.
Or mannequins. What about mannequins? Like
oh yeah, we could do that. Go all the way.
You know, you enter your VR room and you got your headset buddies just standing there wearing a headset ready for you.
I want to be the fly on the wall when you explain to Sylvia that you're behind a bunch of heads to put things on.
Right. Yeah, that's not gonna go well.
No,
but anyway,
I don't think it will.
I think there are some. I think we pretty much have a tentative schedule here. Honestly, the big question mark that I have is how Apple is going to roll out all of these updated Macs. That is my big question this year. And a secondary question would be AirPods Pro 2 when. But really, all those Macs. So the base model MacBook Pro, new MacBook Air, new base model iMac, new iMac Pro, new Mac Pro, and multiple Mac Minis. Like that is my main question. Like how and when?
And we barely touched on the iPad Pro. I mean,
the iPad Pro.
that seems likely in the fall too. I think, don't you? I mean, maybe October.
So if we're gonna get an iPad Pro, I think it's gonna be October. Last year's iPad Pro was exciting because of the new display and the fact that it was running the M1 and much more RAM, but that excitement for the new iPad Pro, I think it wore off pretty quickly.
It did.
Because at WWDC, we didn't really see a justification for all that power, and it continues to be the case. Now, Apple could turn the ship around there by saying, oh, well, if you want to use the brand new external display integration, that is 2021 iPad Pro and beyond only. Risky, very risky move.
Very.
But I could see Apple say, well, it requires Apple Silicon. It requires an M1. To which you could say, isn't the A15 also Apple Silicon? But, branding-wise, they could say M1 and later only if you want to do external displays on iPad Pro.
Yeah, they could blame it on the RAM, I suppose. The iPad Air, it has the same Thunderbolt connector, but it doesn't have the same RAM as the Pro, so maybe that would be the differentiating factor or something.
Will the new iPad Air get an M1? My immediate answer would be no, because
I would say no too. Yeah, because they won't have updated the Pro yet.
Exactly. I think the Air will not get an M1. The Air will get whatever the latest version of the A series chips is, and that way Apple could. If my theory that they're gonna do external displays for M1 iPad Pros only, they can keep saying that it's for iPad Pros with the M1 and later only. The iPad Air does not have the M1, and honestly, like external displays for iPads is kind of a Pro iPad feature, so it kind of makes sense. Also, like in terms of like what's the target audience for this feature. So honestly, I still have a ton of questions. Obviously, what's the pitch for the headset? But my main question is the schedule. Like, what's the rollout of all this? What's it gonna look like?
I think that the iPad Pro M1 and higher makes a lot of sense with the display because they could still put that display out in the spring and say it works with the Mac Mini, and it will also work with our most recent crop of iPad Pros. Kind of adding that extra value and telegraphing that there's going to be more to that relationship between the iPad Pro and the display down the road. Because as I said before, I don't think we'll see anything but mirroring initially, but that could very well be something that gets revealed at WWDC. That there'll be true extended display support for the iPad Pro.
Yeah, but when I say M1 only, by the way, I think I could see Apple do something like this. The display works for everything, right? Even if you have a 2018 iPad Pro, it's gonna work. But on the older iPads, you're gonna get the basic mirroring. If you
Right.
want to
That
have
makes
the,
sense.
what are they gonna call it, extended home screen mode,
Yeah, I think so.
that will require an M1 iPad Pro and later. I could see that. I mean, Apple has done these things before, you know?
Yep. Yep. No, definitely. Definitely. I could see that being the case. All right, Federico. I think that's it for today, unless you've got any more predictions for 2022.
Let me think. Let me think about this. John will reorganize his home screen in a few months.
Well, I think I probably have to because we need more content for the club. If you want to go to Club Mac Stories, and,
I have another.
Yes, I was going to do a pitch for the club.
There will be a Mac Story Selects again. There, I said it. Okay.
Oh, wow. Wow. You're committing us to something very far in advance, Federico. I think people can probably expect that.
No, I'm not committing. It's a prediction.
Oh, it's a prediction. Okay. All right. I predict that you're right.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. I predict you're going to mention Club Mac Stories in a few seconds.
Wow. How did you know? You're reading. You're in my head, Federico. You're in my
see?
head. Wow. Well, if you do want to go to Club Mac Stories and see my home screen, Federico's home screen, which we tend to update at least once a year, what we're doing on the iPhone and the iPad and all that stuff, along with a million other different perks that come with the Club Mac Stories membership, you can go to club.macstories.net/plans to see what all the different tiers offer and what we have in terms of perks there. You can also find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John. Watch. I